Can you imagine being in the middle of the greatest disaster the United States has ever experienced? Or feeling the desperation of searching for a sign of life among tons of rubble? Now imagine that, in the midst of the chaos, a four-legged hero emerges from the dust and destruction. His name was Apollo, a German shepherd trained for rescues, and he was the first to arrive at Ground Zero after the collapse of the Twin Towers. The morning of September 11, 2001, began like any other in New York. The sky was blue, clear, with no sign of what was about to happen. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Minutes later, another plane crashed into the South Tower. In a matter of moments, the most iconic city in the world was plunged into horror. Emergency services were immediately mobilized. Among them was the New York Police Department's K-9 unit, specialized in disaster zone rescues. One of its members was Apollo, a nearly 10-year-old German shepherd with a sharp instinct and unwavering loyalty to his handler, Peter Davis. Together, they had worked on multiple rescues, but nothing had prepared them for what they would face that day. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. 30 minutes later, the North Tower met the same fate. New York's financial district turned into a war zone. Debris, ashes, fire, and the sound of car and building alarms echoing through the ruins. The rescue teams knew that every minute was crucial to saving lives. Apollo and his handler arrived at Ground Zero just 15 minutes after the collapse of the second tower. They were the first to arrive, hoping to find survivors trapped beneath the rubble. The heat was unbearable, the air was thick with dust, and dangers lurked in every corner. But that didn't stop Apollo. His training had prepared him for moments like this. There was no time to waste. Apollo began moving through the debris, his trained nose searching for the slightest sign of life. Peter Davis followed closely, guiding him and ensuring he wasn't in danger. However, danger was everywhere. At one point, Apollo became trapped under a collapse. His fur was burned and his body was covered in ashes. For a moment, it seemed as though one of the bravest souls of the day had fallen. But Apollo shook off the ashes and pressed on. No pain could stop him. His mission was to find survivors, and he wouldn't rest until he succeeded. Peter Davis couldn't believe what he was witnessing. He knew his partner was brave, but what Apollo was demonstrating in that moment went beyond any training. It was pure instinct, pure heart. And with every step he took, Apollo became a true hero in history. The rescue teams began arriving little by little, but Apollo and Peter were already at the heart of the search. The dog moved quickly, marking spots where there might be someone alive. Thanks to his efforts, the first survivors were found beneath the rubble. This was just the beginning of a day that would be forever etched in everyone's memory. And Apollo, the first dog to respond to the call, would not stop until he had done everything within his power. As the hours passed, the rescue mission became increasingly challenging. The unstable structure of the collapsed buildings threatened further collapses, and rescuers battled exhaustion and dehydration. But Apollo showed no signs of fatigue. His instinct and determination drove him forward. Emergency teams began coordinating with the K-9 unit to expand the search. Specific areas were assigned, and Apollo was sent to a zone where a faint cry for help had been heard. Among the remains of what was once an office, his paws moved debris while his nose worked tirelessly. He suddenly stopped in his tracks. He sniffed the ground intensely and then began scratching desperately. Peter Davis knew his partner had found something. He called for the rescuers, who arrived with equipment to safely remove the debris. Beneath tons of concrete and twisted metal, they found a woman alive. Her face was covered in dust, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she murmured between sobs. The paramedics carefully lifted her out as Apollo watched attentively. He had fulfilled his mission once again, But he knew there was still much work to be done. His body was covered in dust, his nose irritated by the debris, but his spirit remained unshaken. Without wasting a second, he turned his head and continued his search, guided by his unfailing sense of smell. With every life he helped save, Apollo became a symbol of hope. In the midst of tragedy, his bravery reminded everyone that light could be found even in the darkest moments. Night fell over Ground Zero, but the search did not stop. Apollo and the other rescue dogs continued their work under the dim glow of floodlights. Controlled explosions and the movement of heavy machinery made every second a challenge. Even so, Apollo showed no signs of fatigue. In the early hours of the morning, his nose picked up another scent. His ears perked up, and his body tensed before he ran toward a pile of rubble. He dug frantically, barking to alert the rescuers. Beneath the remains of a collapsed hallway, they found a firefighter trapped. He was dehydrated and injured, but alive. The rescuers' excitement was evident. One more life saved. Peter knelt beside Apollo, gently stroked his head and whispered, "Good boy." It was a brief moment of tenderness amid the devastation, but there was no time to rest. After making sure the firefighter received medical attention, they continued their mission. Hours turned into days. Apollo's endurance was tested again and again. He slept only a few minutes before returning to work. His body showed signs of exhaustion, but his spirit never wavered. Every time Peter considered pulling him back to rest, Apollo responded with a firm gaze, as if he knew his work wasn't done yet. On September 14th, after nearly 72 hours of relentless effort, Apollo and the other rescue dogs were given a forced break. Veterinarians examined them, ensuring they were fit to continue. Apollo had minor burns on his paws and was dehydrated, but his determination remained unshaken. The human rescuers also felt the weight of exhaustion. Some leaned on the dogs, hugging them for a few seconds, finding comfort in their presence. The bond between humans and animals grew even stronger in those days of pain and hope. As the operation progressed, survivors became scarcer. But Apollo never stopped searching. For him, every minute mattered. Every trace was a possibility. And even as hope faded, he pressed on, proving that bravery knows no limits. The dawn of September 15th brought an air of uncertainty. Ground Zero remained engulfed in a thick cloud of dust, and the hope of finding more survivors dwindled with each passing hour. Yet Apollo did not waver. His energy seemed inexhaustible despite the physical and mental toll of the past days. Peter Davis knew his partner was reaching his limit, but he also knew that nothing would stop him. Communication among the rescue teams intensified. New search zones were established and specific tasks were assigned. Apollo and Peter were directed to what had once been an underground parking lot. There, amid twisted steel and darkness, there was a barely perceptible sound, a faint knock, a sign of life. Apollo cautiously descended, his nose guiding him through the remains of concrete. Suddenly, Apollo began barking. His paws dug frantically. Peter rushed to his side, calling for the rescuers. With the right equipment, they managed to open a space in the debris and found a man trapped under a metal desk. He had miraculously survived thanks to a small pocket of oxygen. With extreme care, paramedics lifted him out and transported him to a safe zone. Thanks to Apollo, another life had been saved. As the hours passed, the nature of the work began to shift. The mission was no longer just about finding survivors, but also recovering bodies. It was a painful but necessary task, providing answers to families desperately waiting for news of their loved ones. Although Apollo was trained for rescues, he seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He moved respectfully among the wreckage, guiding the rescuers with the same unwavering determination. The media started to take notice of the rescue dogs' efforts. Cameras and reporters captured every moment when a dog marked an area, every instance in which someone was found. The image of Apollo, covered in dust and wearing his rescue harness, became a symbol of hope and resilience. Peter was given a short break, and although he tried to convince Apollo to stop and rest, the dog refused. He drank some water, received a massage on his injured paws, and after just a few minutes, he was back on his feet, ready to continue. His dedication to the mission was absolute. It wasn't just his training, it was his instinct, his very nature. The following days were a mix of emotions. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but each discovery, each recovered life gave the teams the strength to push forward. Apollo became an inspiration, not just for the rescuers, but for the entire nation. His bravery was undeniable, his loyalty unbreakable. On September 17th, after nearly a week of uninterrupted work, the time finally came for Apollo to rest. His paw showed signs of deeper wounds, and his body reflected the toll of his efforts. Peter took him to a safe zone where veterinarians examined him. He needed to recover, and though reluctant, Apollo seemed to understand. As he lay on a blanket, his gaze still fixed on ground zero, Peter sat beside him and gently stroked his fur. "You did it, buddy," he whispered. At that moment, he realized that what they had done would forever be etched in history, but more importantly, in the hearts of those who had witnessed the unwavering dedication of a dog willing to give everything to save lives. Apollo's story didn't end there. His bravery was recognized in the months that followed, and he became a symbol of canine heroism. He was awarded the Dickin Medal, the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross, an honor reserved for only the most extraordinary heroes. His legacy extended beyond September 11th, inspiring future generations of rescue dogs and their handlers. The bond between Apollo and Peter was never broken. They remained together, sharing a connection that went beyond training. They were partners. They were family. Time passed, but Apollo's story continued to resonate in the memories of those who had witnessed his courage. After the grueling mission at Ground Zero, Peter and Apollo took time to recover. However, their work was far from over. In the months that followed, they participated in tributes, ceremonies, and training sessions to prepare new generations of rescue dogs. By the end of 2001, Apollo was invited to a special event in New York City, where rescuers and survivors gathered to honor the heroes of September 11th. On stage, Peter proudly held the Dickin Medal Apollo had received, while the German Shepherd watched with his calm, knowing eyes, as if he understood the significance of the moment. The connection between survivors and the rescue dogs became evident during these gatherings. One of the women Apollo had helped find at Ground Zero approached Peter with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, gently stroking Apollo's head. In his quiet nobility, the dog rested his muzzle in her hand as if he understood her gratitude. Over time, Apollo continued to play a vital role in New York's K-9 unit. Though age and physical wear eventually limited his field work, his legacy became an essential part of training new rescue dogs. Peter and his team used his story as inspiration, proving that the courage and dedication of a dog could make a difference in extreme situations. In 2004, after years of service, Apollo officially retired. His last days in the unit were emotional. His teammates, both human and canine, honored him with a special tribute. For Peter, it was a bittersweet moment. He knew his friend needed rest, but saying goodbye to their active duty together was not easy. Apollo's retirement did not mean the end of his influence. In the years that followed, his story became part of training programs for rescue dogs across the country. His bravery and determination were used as references in multiple courses and exercises. Every time a new puppy joined the unit, Peter would remember Apollo and the indelible mark he had left. When Apollo passed away, he was honored with a hero's farewell. His name was inscribed on the memorial for canine heroes, alongside other dogs who had given their lives and efforts for the well-being of others. With his heart full of memories, Peter knew that his loyal companion would never be forgotten. The years passed, but every September 11th, Peter would return to Ground Zero, look toward the horizon, and remember his loyal friend. In his mind, he always held the image of Apollo, covered in dust, his gaze locked onto the mission, guided by an instinct that went beyond human understanding. He wasn't just a rescue dog, he was a hero. Thus concludes the story of Apollo, the first dog to respond to the tragedy of September 11th. His legacy lives on in every rescue dog that continues to save lives, in every trainer inspired by his story, and in every person who remembers that even in the darkest moments, there is always light. And many times, that light comes on four paws with an unbreakable heart. And so we end another incredible story of bravery and heroism. On your channel, Hero Animals, we celebrate all those extraordinary beings who, regardless of their species, have shown incredible courage. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more amazing stories. See you in the next adventure, where heroism knows no limits.